and getting a little bit more power. And the fact that we saw him at least get the ball out there on some of those deep passes, 40 yards, and it started to flutter a little bit. It makes a little bit more sense now, in my opinion. And the fact that he was able still be able to make some of those moves with that ankle being that bad, I don't.
Welcome back to the program. You see Chris Franklin there. Excited to have him. Chris Franklin, NJ.com, Birds 365, Johnny Mac flying solo today. Jody Macless, Chris Franklin. So that should excite you. No Jody for you.
Oh, this is weird.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I like looking at the try box. I'm like, okay, cool.
yeah,
I'm looking over.
you gotta get used to it. But I appreciate you hopping on. I think it's a great day. We had obviously a lot going on in the NFL. The Washington Commanders, by the way, they get buried in all this, unfortunately.
Come on. I don't know if Daniel Snyder watched the Russell Crowe movie and thought, hey, you know what? This would be a great idea. Let's be the commander. I know you got the commander in chiefs, but I mean, I know Red Wolves would have been a better thing. Red Tails. There's so many other options, but
There's a
Commanders.
lot. I will say, and people were getting used to Washington football team, but I think real quick before we get into the substance, I do think it was smart because Washington doesn't do a lot of smart things, but they were able to double down on the merchandise. They kept that going for a couple years as Washington football team. And then their fans, if they have any fans left, now they got to go out and buy Commanders gear. So they're double dipping. I do give them credit for that plan to take advantage of the merch, so to speak.
Just imagine if if you're a fan of quarterbacks overall for that team, and then you have to decide, okay, I want to get a Taylor Heineke or a Ryan Fitzpatrick jersey. Oh wait,
Well,
now
right.
you have to get the football team one. Oh wait, not again. You have to get the Commanders one. So they do get a lot of them in there, but I mean, how many times I'm just worried about the fans I mean, they're already clowns sometimes for the most part. Like, hey, look at this, we're the command, and they're trying to build suspense and excitement. We're the Commanders, and the
Yeah.
crowd goes
Well,
mild.
hey, look, if you're buying a Taylor Heineke or Ryan Fitzpatrick jersey, you probably got bigger problems anyway. So
Yeah,
you might as
disposable
well.
income.
You got too much disposable income. So I will say that. But I'm glad to have you on, and obviously you can speak much more closely to this. I had Dan Lust on this morning, does a great job with the legal issues, but we're a couple white guys doing our best to break down the situation in the NFL with minority hiring. So I want to hear from you and Brian Flores going thermonuclear on this league. Look, I think a lot of us it's self-evident. I mean, the Rooney Rule. There have been so many. I talked to Leslie Frazier about this when he was after he lost his job in Minnesota years and years ago, when he was like the candidate who you would interview before you hired the guy you really wanted. So when you see this happen, and this is a league that's predominantly African American, and there's one as we speak today, and that's Mike Tomlin, one African American head coach. Just your thoughts on Brian Flores and why he was forced to do this, why he felt forced to do this at this particular time.
Personally, it's a little frustrating because when you look at so many candidates that are qualified, and then just the one name itself, Jim Caldwell. You look at a guy who took the Lions of all teams, the Lions, Detroit Lions. Let's say again, he took the Detroit Lions to the playoffs, and you see him barely get a call now, or if he is, it's rushed in, and then usually like a day later, you see somebody else hired with a different name. It's like, okay, yeah, well, he was basically just brought in. So, we got the Rooney Rule. We're set. It's a little frustrating. I've talked to a lot of coaches. I spoke to another coach yesterday, and they're supportive, very supportive, because they feel they get where Flores is coming from with that. Now, Belichick, that whole Belichick thing with the text message thing, that was, I don't think Belichick kind of was expecting all this to happen, but I think that's a key cog. The fact that a lot of times it's pre-planned. It's like, okay, well, we know who we want. Okay, let's make sure we just satisfy the rule so we don't get in trouble, and well, we may lose a draft pick if we don't. Like it shouldn't be that mentality. It should be about, and we hear so many times we want to get the best candidates. Well, I'm still having a tough time coming to grips of seeing how guys like Caldwell, guys like Byron Leftwich, can't have trouble getting jobs. Guys like Todd Bowles, who was a head coach beforehand, have trouble getting a job as secondhand, but guys like Josh McDaniels gets another job once again. It's stuff like that where it's still a little tough when it comes from my view. It's still tough to reconcile with that.
I thought it was interesting this week, and we'll see what happens today. But the thought process around the league is that Jim Harbaugh is going to get the Minnesota job. And that would be another guy, obviously, getting a second opportunity coming back from college. Um, and D'Amico Ryans, the ex-Eagles linebacker, pulled out because he spun it in a I want to keep learning. I want to, but we all know why he pulled out. He knew he wasn't getting the job. And Patrick Graham had a 9-hour interview, and maybe something changes. Um, on the other hand, they hired Cherry Hill guy, Kwesi Adapo Mensa, who's an African American GM, and he's the guy who wants Jim Harbaugh. So there's a lot of context, a lot of nuance to these individual decisions, but the overriding factor of one, and we'll see, there's still obviously coaches that need to be hired, but whether it's one, whether it's two, whether it's three, in a league that is 75%, I think, African American, why the disconnect? Is it just because people aren't in a position to uh, have a sort of uptick, a mobility, whatever you want to call it, to be in a position? Because to be a head coach in this league, Chris, you got to be the conventional ways. You got to be an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, or is it just getting more Ryan Poleses of the world, who also hired Matt Eberflus as well, getting more people in positions of power? Is there any easy answer?
It's going to take a multi-tiered approach. It's going to take a lot of things. It's going to take I think a lot of development and getting these guys out there. Like, I'm glad that for the most part we see a lot more of these coordinators out there speaking and getting more media time. Because beforehand, I like things like we're seeing with the Senior Bowl, where they're having the elevation status, where you get some of these coaches you probably see, like, you look in passing first. A lot of times you see their name hired that first day or when the coaching staffs are assembled, and then it's not until somebody's doing extremely bad or somebody moves on or a coach has to let go, and then you hear the name again. Oh yeah, that guy was the quarterback's coach or the lineman's coach. I like elements of that. I still think there's a lot that needs to be done in the way of getting more opportunities, not at the coordinator positions. I think there's some chance that they can do a little better in that aspect, and getting these guys in situations that they're comfortable and just learning that stuff. I mean, it'd be nice if it was like a one way where you think, hey, you know what, this. If it was just one thing, that would be perfect. There's so many different layers over time. I think that it has to be addressed, and I would love to see. I think even when it goes to the agent level, I mean, when you look at there's when it comes to the top coaches or just overall coaches, there's only like 5 or 6 main coaches. I think the NFL did a diversity study back in 2019, 2020, where a lot of the agents carried a lot. Like they carried a lot of the things and make it and have influence on decisions of what coaches, and they may nudge the general manager, hey, you should add this person to think. I think there's a lot of layers that has to be, the whole entire process has to be reevaluated if you want to see more African American coaches, Hispanic, a lot of underrepresented communities represented, become coaches and coordinators in this league.
It is a difficult problem. Obviously, the NFL, I think, to be honest, I don't give the NFL credit much of the time, but I think the Rooney Rule the thought process behind it was altruistic, and they were trying to do good, trying to create opportunities. But it has become this sort of box checking. That's what Brian Flores, he was on CBS this morning. That's what he called it, checking the box. I certainly think there's too much of it. I wish I had the answer. I don't have the answer. I wish somebody smarter than me would come up with the answer, but we'll continue to work. I do want to shift gears and talk more about the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. We'll start there because he's undergoing surgery this morning. The NFL Network reported. So obviously, that ankle injury was far more serious than the Eagles let on. Understandably, why they went the way they went, because he's a mobile quarterback. You don't want opposing teams knowing how serious the issue is. But when you look back at the stretch of the season, Chris, now with that knowledge that Jalen Hurts has to have surgery, does that change your thought process of his performance? And does it give you more optimism about his future as the starting quarterback of this team?
I think it makes me a little bit more optimistic. Is a I think a tinge bit, especially when you have, especially with that ankle and the way to follow through and try to drive on the ball. That really impacts you. And the fact that we saw, I mean, we saw when he walked into the press conference in a walking boot, and it was like it's a comfort thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
usually, I like to feel comfortable. Usually, like sometimes in a hoodie, but I don't wear a
Yeah,
walking boot. And
it's not
like,
very comfortable. I've had walking boots. I know you have. They're not
yeah,
comfortable. They're
yeah,
not comfortable.
it's rough. It is rough, and it's like this is a little, this is concerning a little bit, but it's. I think that has a lot to do when you drive into a throw and getting a little bit more power, and the fact that we saw him at least get the ball out there on some of those deep passes, 40 yards, and see it started to flutter a little bit. It makes a little bit more sense now, in my opinion. And the fact that he was able to make some of those moves and with that ankle being that bad, we don't know. And this is speculation. We don't know if he got the shot. We don't know what he did to make sure he was all
Yeah.
right. That's when it comes to his toughness decade, I don't think that's ever been questioned. Now I'm just worried about personally. I think like I'm looking at his long term thing. How much damage was inside that ankle that I say he's gonna be ready but he's gonna be ready in time for OTAs and everything. But is it just something that's going to be all right? So I think that's something to watch now. But overall, I mean, I think it's a little bit more concerning. I think it's when it comes to his overall, it might actually improve some of his actually throwing power now.
Yeah, we've seen. I mean, Lane Johnson, obviously different position. You're talking about a really big guy, so he's got that. But those ankle injuries, they could be nagging, and those ankle surgeries can be an issue moving forward. So yeah, it's kind of, you have to take that wait and see approach. Um, the Senior Bowl is going on. Your buddy, my buddy, Mike K down there. Mobile. The draft starts in Mobile, they like to say.
Yeah.
I like to say the silly season starts in Mobile.
Yeah.
All the craziness with the NFL draft. And this is maybe, I'm going to call it the Eagles super draft, because, they're starting the process with 3 first round picks, 15, 16, 19. And we just talked about the quarterback and the injury and ankle surgery. And I think we're all hyper focused on that question. We're very early in the process, Chris, and people are already talking about there's no quarterbacks worthy of this. There's no quarterbacks worthy of that. Eagles can't get caught up in that nonsense. They got to fairly evaluate each particular player. It starts with Kenny Pickett. This silly season begins. His hands are small. He's got small hands. Austin Powers alert. He's got small hands.
And this is what I love about the whole process is you have these guys, you have 2, 3, sometimes 4 years of tape of these guys performing, and you have all this data. You see them, and now for the next 3, 4 months, now you're gonna start to go, well, his hands are small. Well, his twitch is not as fast as we thought to. Oh wow, look at that 3 cone. Well, he proved that he can do it 2 or 3 years before. No, sorry, the 3 cone. No, he drops down now. This I think it helps. All this data helps a little bit in a way, but you still got to rely on past performance. But when you look at the quarterbacks, I think what the Eagles should do that, not just for the sense of just seeing due diligence, but I think to actually legitimately get, if they're going to trade one of these picks or have an opportunity to move up or down, they got to show that they're potentially looking at a quarterback. They don't want to tip their hand. They want to show they have all options open, because if they were to go out and say, you know what, no, we're not looking at any quarterbacks whatsoever, well, when it comes time to that first, like say 15, and teams just go, oh, well, they're not looking at quarterback. Okay, what can they be moving, and start maneuvering around, try to jump and stuff like that. So I think it's fair to do the due diligence. The only possible scenario that I would even think about it is if Pickett maybe fell to 19, which is not going to happen in my opinion. I think he's going to be going. I think a couple of those guys are going to be going by then. But I just don't see anybody in this draft who I could say in 3-4 years from now you're thinking, wow, this was the right decision. This is going to completely change the franchise. I just don't see that guy currently in the top, even the top 5 or 6 guys are in this draft.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. Does the 3 first round picks, does that change your thinking at all? You mentioned if Kenny's there at 19. So I think, let me phrase it this way. I think, people have looked at this as if you can get a star quarterback in the draft and you think Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, whoever is that type of quarterback, or you can get the Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, everything's cleared up. Okay, you can get distinctly better. But what about door number 3? What about saying we like Jalen Hurts? We think he's got a chance to improve and continue to get better. But you also take another bite at the apple just in case it doesn't happen. And you take Kenny Pickett with 15, 16, or 19 and say, okay, now we got 2 guys. Maybe one guy develops better than the other guy. The Eagles value the position. Why not throw more darts at the dartboard?
That's not bad. That's not a bad way to go about it. Personally, what I would do just to shape things, I'm going to cheat and steal your thunder, Monty Hall, and say I want to carry one of my doors in for a door in 2023 to have an extra spot in case I need to make a trade.
To do that. But maybe you can't because you got to convince somebody, that there's value in trading out for a future first round. So that I think is a little bit more difficult than maybe people will make it out to be.
I'm starting to really I'm having conversations with others. I think I'm having a conversation with like the teams like the Steelers and maybe even Tampa Bay if they're looking to go young. I know they got a lot of pieces. They got to do a lot of decisions with Brady leaving, but teams that are a little hemming and hawing right now in the quarterback position that are in the playoffs, and maybe a guy like Malik Willis starts to fall a little bit. Or maybe it's Corral that falls or somebody else. I'm trying to make deals with them and say, hey, you know what? Just move a couple of spaces. Give us your first. You're going to be a playoff team next year, you think, right? Well, give us your first next year. It will, trust me, it won't be higher than 22, 23. And then somehow you get that next year and you have your own, and you can use that in a package to get another quarterback that's going to be out there, I think, as well, too. So I'm riding with Hurts, and I think I'm using these picks mostly on defense because I think there still needs to be a lot of upgrades in those positions. And I also look at even if Gannon comes back or not, I still think you're going to give the defensive coordinator, whoever comes in here. If Gannon leaves, you want to give them the best pieces available to get their defense right, and you need a young nucleus on that side of the ball too. So I'd use it personally on defense.
Now you do have an offensive-minded head coach, though.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, it's interesting because the Eagles, and as you know, they like to play up that. I think they ended up number 1 in the NFL in explosive plays, how they define explosive plays. Either way, which is pretty impressive, but it was unconventional. And if you're Nick Sirianni, and I always say, I can't stand watching wide receiver screens because you and I got to see all of them from the Eagles this year, and they are ugly. And then I watch Deebo Samuel, and I say, oh, yeah, okay. I like a wide receiver screen occasionally because they got somebody who can run it. If you're Nick Sirianni and you're down in Mobile next to Howie Roseman, what are you whispering in his ear? It's great to have defense, but I'm an offensive coach.
I'm probably whispering, I need a backup for I need a plan B in case Jason Kelce decides to retire. That's what I'm worried about. Like, I need somebody. I need an interior alignment. But I see you're getting on that one. I thought some wide receiver screens. I thought they should have thrown more to Smith because I think he has that type of skill set to be able to run them more. When it came to Jalen Rager, nah, that I understood them wanting to get the ball more towards his hands and try to get him involved, but no, he's not. He's nowhere near Ayuk. He's nowhere near Debo Samuel or those types of guys, or Jamar Chase or those type of guys. I'm probably in I probably avoid the path of the Lions and continue trying to draft a wide receivers to fill that need. However, I think there could be some guys down the draft. Say if you want to take a flyer on a fourth or fifth round guy to potentially fill that need, you go for it. I'm looking more towards free agency. I'm basically, if I'm the Eagles, I'm looking at Mike Williams and going, "Hey, how much did you like Nick Sirianni as a wide receivers coach and with the Chargers? Hey, coming out this way, we could recreate some of that stuff. I think I would like to see him doing a wide receiver. I think he's a bigger guy. He's still got some quickness as well too. And he's reliable with his route tree as well too. So I'd probably look toward free agency for that guy, and because it's going to take a little bit as well too. Because we know for most rookie wide receivers, it takes about a full year till you get that full fledged. You see what you projected them out to be. But I think if you get Williams in now as a plug and play in this offense with all the other elements you have there, I think it makes it a little bit more dynamic and you can be even a more explosive offense, I think, over in a way.
Yeah, I'm with you with free agency and wide receiver. I mean, there's certain teams. The Eagles are a perfect example of this. I mean, you know they're going to be able to develop offensive linemen. You
Yeah.
know they're not going to be able to develop wide receivers unless they come in as almost a finished product, as Devontae Smith was. Um,
So O-line
so
factory.
yeah, so I want to I want to get a proven commodity at wide receiver to complement Devontae Smith because I don't think the Eagles can develop him, and I think that's been a disappointment because look, the old coaching staff is the old coaching staff. The new coaching staff, the current coaching staff, they were brought in. They all have history with wide receivers. Nick Sirianni, Kevin Patullo, even Shane Steichen to a degree, and obviously you have Aaron Moorhead. They can't develop a wide receiver. What is it? Just a mental block? What I? It's not like Jalen Rager doesn't have talent. I say this to everybody, and even Rick Spielman has been doing the rounds, and everybody looks at because he was able to get Justin Jefferson. But he said, the kid's got talent. The kid, you saw the ability. We were there in training camp when he was making the one-handed catches. Is it just mental with Jalen Rager?
I think it was mental with Jalen Rager. I think it was mental with Travis Fulgham as well too. I think when you look at those guys, and that's the infuriating part. If I'm looking from a front office standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, because you see these guys have the physical ability, and it's the consistency thing with them, and it's like they're continually processing what they should do in these offices. It's like if you're not running a go route, well, I have to read the defense. I have to see move things. Oh, I have to and lining up the right way. I mean, how many times do we see during training camp either Rager or Fulgham just line up in the wrong spot and they're hurrying up trying to get in the right spot, and then there's like quote unquote like 7 8 seconds left, like 5 seconds left on the play clock, and then they're thinking about what their job is and they get thrown off. I think it's all in their heads now, and I think for the best thing for Rager, just like it was for Fulgham. Well, Fulgham hasn't latched on to a regular roster and contributed, but best thing for Rager right now is to do like a Nelson Aguilar and find a new spot and hope to clear his mind and get into a new system because I look at Rager and I look at Ben Simmons and they're almost it's eerie. It's one of those things where I think it's going to come down to that spot where it's where he's located at, and just thinking like, hey, you know what, he's having a tough time until he gets to the new start. I think it's going to be just a lot of the same, and it might be rough for him if he comes back for a third season. So
Yeah, it is
they
going to
need
be
that.
rough. And I don't know what the Eagles do because they're not going to get anything back for him at this point. So he's still under his rookie deal. Are you going to cut him? Are you going to go down that route? Or are you just going to sit him on the back end of the 53 and just say, okay, we'll play this thing out and maybe he can contribute on special teams? It's going to be an ugly situation. But before I let you go, I want to talk about what I think is the most difficult decision for the Eagles moving forward. Um, Miles Sanders, right? Entering the final year of his rookie deal at a position nobody wants to pay, not just the Eagles. It's been devalued around this league. We all know Miles can play, tremendously talented. But, there's issues as a pass receiver, issues in pass protection, leaves some meat on the bone even as a runner. But he is explosive and he is talented and he is a good player and he is their best running back. But are you going to extend him? I can't extend him. Can you extend him?
The only way I'd extend them is if they brought in another 1A type back and then you play them off each other. So that way you have the same way. And if I extend them, I'm extending probably maybe 2 years tops. I couldn't see, personally, I couldn't see doing a 4 or 5 year deal with him just based off his injury history, his availability. And the one thing you see with running backs is over time they usually gain that patience. I think to find holes and to let things develop. And with with Sanders, it just seems like every time it takes him to miss a couple of games, and then by the time he comes back, he looks at the other running backs, see the holes that they are able to, the yards they're able to gain by being patient. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then we start to see that again toward the end of this season. The way he was like, I saw that stutter step, but then it's infuriating when you see a cutback lane on the opposite side of the field, and like, why didn't he take that? So I think he's still working on that aspect a lot, and I think the patience will get there. I think when you look at his speed, it's there as well too. It's going to come together, but I just can't pay that. In my mind, I just can't pay that much money or use that many years for Sanders, knowing that what his injury history is and his availability. I think he should come back, and even if they have to, I wouldn't. No, I would definitely would franchise, but if they have to use 1 year deals just to try to say come back, prove yourself, and try to do it that way, I wouldn't be opposed to that either when his contract runs out after after the next season. But it's a lot of it's a lot tough because it's almost like Rager. It's infuriating because you know what he can become if he remains healthy.
So is that a sneaky? It's not going to be first round. They're not going to take a running back in the first round. But is that a sneaky potential option on day two, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles? Even though we talk about the vaunted running game and everybody runs for 5 yards per carry, it doesn't matter who it is. If it's Miles, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, behind that offensive line. Kenny Gainwell is obviously going to be part of this organization as the third down back, but I don't think they look at him as a feature back. Is that a potential low-key option in day two for this team? When I talked about Nick Sirianni, hey, why not? Let's get a real bell cow running back.
I think after Jalen Hurts was taken when Carson Wentz was taking 22, all bets are off with this team. But overall, I think I don't foresee I don't foresee it in the day two. I could see like a 6th round pick being taken on a guy that they initially think can be a special teams guy, a guy who has starting capability, but is like he may has like some like a check mark. I don't know, like maybe they had some concerns about his past, or maybe there's something about like there's an injury concern. Guys like that who can not only just like kick return, punt return, but also can be a starter. And they developed that type of guy and use him as the ace in the hole in case something else happens. Because Jordan Howard, we know his stinger history, but when he's effective there, he got the questions. And like you said, Scott is. I think Scott would get an even more elevated role before I think I think Scott would get more of an elevated role before they took a guy like in day two.
All right. Well, I know you're a day two guy. You're a day one guy, Chris Franklin.
Thank you. Let me try.
NJ.com. I'm not going to call it NewJersey.com.
No.
NJ.com.
You say we'll both get the text.
Yeah. McMullen's doing the show. He can't even do the research to get there.
How many times say it's NJ not New Jersey? I can see it right now. I can hear it without even seeing the text.
All the way from Mobile, I can hear it. NJ.com. Chris Franklin at C Franklin News on Twitter. Follow him there. does a great job covering the Eagles, covering the NFL. And thank you, Chris. Always appreciate when you hop on board Birds 365.
Thanks, John, man. Thanks for your invite as well, too. Always fun.